Sure, it's tough being the United Nations. Trying to accommodate every country in the world can make you do some pretty weird things. But nothing's quite as strange as when the UN established two organizations with opposite objectives. One exists to reduce the world's number of refugees, while the other exists to increase the number of refugees. Huh? Yeah, strange, right? This is the story of how that happened and how we are all a part of it. The first organization is the UNHCR, which has served tens of millions of refugees, helping them earn citizenship, become self-reliant, and rebuild their lives. The second organization is called UNRWA. UNRWA has been achieving their goal of refugee expansion, increasing the number of Palestinian refugees from 700,000 in 1948 to over 5 million today. How, you ask, can an organization exist to expand the number of refugees? Well, let's take a look back. In 1948, during and directly following the war in Israel, 800,000 Jews either voluntarily left or were forcibly kicked out of Middle Eastern countries, and 700,000 Arabs either voluntarily left or were forcibly kicked out of their lands. It was a tragedy for both groups, but these two groups with the same problem went down two very different paths. The new state of Israel absorbed the Jewish refugees and helped them reestablish their lives. Within a couple of years, none of the Jews were considered refugees. In contrast, the Arab League instructed all Arab nations to deny citizenship to the Palestinians in order to protect their right of return. This created a humanitarian crisis for the Palestinian refugees, so the UN stepped in to help. But the Arab countries then blocked the UN from helping the Palestinians resettle. What was the UN to do with these 700,000 Palestinians? In order to appease the Arab countries, the UN formed UNRWA. Instead of confronting the refugee crisis, UNRWA quickly narrowed its focus to giving the Palestinians humanitarian aid, ensuring that they remained refugees, and that their refugee status could be passed to their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, and every generation until they received their own state. So that's how UNRWA makes more refugees, and today there are now 5 million refugees, a number that will continue to grow. But that number doesn't tell what this has done to the descendants of those refugees in the Arab countries they try to survive in. In Egypt, they're treated as illegal aliens, devoid of any rights. In Lebanon, they're barred from 73 job categories, including medicine, law, and engineering. They cannot become citizens, cannot own land, and 53% are still living in camps, where they're even denied tools to repair their houses. Meanwhile, 95% of the Palestinian refugees in Syria depend on humanitarian aid to live, and now that aid isn't reaching them, many are dying of starvation. So how can we help Palestinian refugees move on with their lives? The answer is simple. If you are a taxpayer in the US or Europe, you and I are the largest funding source for UNRWA, and that makes us part of the story. Our countries must either demand that it redefine its mission and advance refugee settlement in their countries of residence, or dissolve UNRWA and give UNHCR responsibility for Palestinians. History tells us that whenever we put land over people, we end up with a graveyard. Now is the time for the nations who fund UNRWA to demand that they stop forcing refugees to become martyrs in an endless political battle over land. Learn more at jij.org.